Good morning, everyone. Are you tired of hearing about tariffs? Are you tired of trying to explain it at cocktail parties only to find yourself stumped? What are these tariffs anyway? How did the calculations work? Who's getting helped? Who's getting harmed? Wait, is it good for me? What's in it for me? Well, I'm here to tell you that I am going to have another episode of Tariffication, being terrified about tariffs. And before we get started, because this is what I call back on, is my softball jersey. When I started this is the Terrifiers, I played on an intramural softball team for the U.S. International Trade Commission, my lucky number 12. We played against other government agencies around DC, and we were the Terrifiers because it's a little known fact that we actually have trade laws that protect American producers and American businesses from unfair trade practices. So, I want to kind of talk about what's happening with the tariffication of our economy. But before we do it, I want to build some credibility. Look at my nice Cornell sweater. I serve on the Agribusiness Council of the Dyson School at Cornell, which has one of the premier ag econ programs and resource economics programs. It's a land-grant university, and land-grant universities were established by President Lincoln to ensure that we have the right research and the right support that we need for our industry and our farmers across the United States to ensure national food security. So the reason I'm raising Cornell is actually this morning I got a nice text from my husband that said, "Honey, look at these tariffs that Canada is applying, maybe up to 200% or more on butter and poultry and eggs, and yes, and yes, and yes." And he said, "If this is true, it's terrible." Breathe in, breathe out. Are these the kind of text messages you have with your spouse? And then I sent a note back saying, "Sweetie, of course these exist, because I know that there are things called tariff rate import quotas." My Cornell thesis from 1999, the economic impacts of two-tier tariff rate import quotas, an empirical application to the United States dairy industry. Wait a second, United States? Yes, we too have very high tariffs that could exceed 200% depending on the country that you are and the agreements that we have with you. These tariff rate quotas are actually what is being discussed as tariffs out of the current administration. Look at these tariffs. Well, we knew these tariffs existed because when we got the last global trade round, which was the Uruguay round, and the Uruguay round agreement on agriculture, we actually negotiated tariff rate quotas and very high tariffs for ourselves here in the United States. And other countries negotiated tariff rate quotas. And these tariff rate quotas were actually meant to provide a zero duty within the quota, the amount we're going to allocate to Canada or the amount we'll allocate to other countries, and then put exorbitantly high rates beyond that to discourage any imports beyond the quota. And so when we're seeing these high tariffs, what we're saying is we knew they existed. And by the way, please don't come look in our house, in our country. We have some of the highest we have some of the most restrictive TRQs, tariff rate quotas, for our dairy products. Yes, if you want to know how much Emmentaler, or what's known as Swiss cheese, we can import into the United States annually, go check Chapter 4 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States. And so yes, I did nerd out and wrote a thesis on the economic impacts of two-tier tariff rate import quotas. I wanted to demonstrate that actually by putting TRQs in, we weren't actually liberalizing our economies. We were locking in quotas for all time. And ultimately, those out-of-quota tariffs were supposed to be reduced over time to a point that we would reach more liberalized trade. And that has not happened. So this administration is not wrong in the sense that we do need to get back at all those protections, but are we willing to do it for ourselves? So I built street cred on Cornell, and I will return to this model quickly if you're at all interested. But let me build a little more street cred before we talk about terrifying the economy. And this comes from another land-grant university, the University of California, Davis. Woohoo! Where I worked again with one of the top leaders in economists in the world, Dan Sumner, I'm giving a shout out to you, who educated me on the impacts of public policy in food and agriculture. And so I'm raising all of this so that you're well aware that we do have experts out there. Please turn to us, because when you get a text from your spouse like I did last night and I say, "Dear honey, where did that come from?" You're going to want context. And I'm here and willing to provide that context. So just to get us started quickly, and I know this video is going way too long, so you can fast forward or you can come back to it, but I'm going to put on my Terrifiers t-shirt and just have a quick discussion with you about the fact that I wore my fatigues, by the way, because this is boot camp. This is Terrifiers boot camp. A quick discussion. When you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, "We deserve to put these tariffs on other countries," I just want to note, for the most part, we've negotiated pretty much the strongest trade agreements that work in our favor in the United States than any other country. Why? Because other countries want to access our market, and so they're doing it on our terms. We have 15 trade agreements that we have negotiated. And you know what disappoints me? When I was a young, sort of optimistic trade analyst and working at the US Trade Representative, is that we actually didn't get to free trade when we would negotiate these things. We would actually provide sometimes little slivers to our negotiating partners, whether it was the US-Chile free trade agreement. I remember going home at 2:30 at night and thinking, gee, we didn't actually give them access the way we got access. But it was enough access for them to enter into an agreement with us. The time that I helped supply and work on the calculations to figure out how are we going to solve the poultry dispute between the US and Mexico. We didn't get to free trade. We actually limited the Mexican exporters to a quota to the United States. What we took in return is an export quota for our pork producers to their country. And so I was kind of discouraged, thinking I thought this was the place where we were going to actually lower barriers to food moving across borders so that consumers could benefit. And one of my bosses at the time said, "Devry, some trade is better than no trade." And so that stuck with me. But do we have an opportunity to lower protections? Yes. Should we be coming back together as a global trade community and trying to figure out how we help consumers bear less of the burden? 100%. Because these tariffs are ultimately going to be 100% consumer financed. You and I are going to be paying for these tariffs. The grandest benefit that the global trade rounds and the regional trade agreements and the bilateral trade agreements have offered us as Americans is an ability to lower our food bill, to lower our consumption bill, whether we want to go out and buy critical durable products, etc. And so if you have questions, come to me. Actually put them in in the chat after I post this, and I'll do as many Terrifier discussions as I need to get the right information out there. So let's just say that's Tariffication in under 10 minutes. That was 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Oh, and I do commend this thesis to you. The economics of two-tier tariff-rate import quotas, an empirical application to the U.S. dairy industry. To think back in 1997, when I started working on this, that I had the hope and aspiration that the world would come together for the betterment of citizens worldwide is, it's just a neat reflection. Take care. Tariffication Wednesday. Bye.